Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me directly, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. It's in the description below. Your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any Watchbox platform. Reach out directly to me at tmosso@thewatchbox.com. Today, we are discussing the much-anticipated arrival on the channel of the Lange Sohne Odysseus. In white gold, this is Germany's take on an ultra-haute de gamme sports watch, and in fact, it is the first sports watch to be built by the modern a. Lange Sohne since its refounding in 1990. Let's take a look at the watch, how it fits, and how it compares to the competition. So in white gold, it's hefty, but it's not big. 40.5 millimeters in diameter, it's 11.4 millimeters thick. From lug to lug, the case measures 47.1 millimeters. Then if we include these outcropping end links, the total distance across the wrist is 52.2 millimeters, and it has a 20 millimeter spacing between its lugs, though the junction of this strap with the case is not conventional, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The watch is easy to wear on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist. You can see it's nice and flat. It's not as thin as a Royal Oak Jumbo or a 5711, but then again, it is different both in size and appearance from those watches. It has its own distinct character. It is easy to wear on my wrist, and I think a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference would wear this watch pretty well. It's low enough to fit underneath the cuff, so yes, it can also be your dress watch. And you can see down the barrel in particular that the edge of the case itself, not the end links, but the case, come nowhere near the edge of my wrist. Now, the strap's a good-looking piece and wonderfully smooth, almost buttery soft. It's tapered, it's medium brown, it's bolstered to give it some volume. It features a folded edge, and then there's a contrasting stitch, a light contrast, in a gray stitch to match the gray dial. You can see that there is a little release underneath each end link. There's a little end link built into the end of the strap, and a strap tool comes with the watch that can be used to depress and release that quick release system, so you can rapidly swap out to, for example, Lange's factory rubber strap that makes the most of this watch's 120 meter water resistance. We have a white gold pin buckle here, but this is not the general piece used on most Lange watches. It has the same fundamental look with the fastening, the curves, the retention bar, and then the elevated bridge, but you can see it has satination on its side to match the look of the watch, and it's a little bit more angular and block-like than a conventional Lange pin buckle. It still has the same feature, whereby the strap sits inside the buckle rather than stacking up underneath, so you have that elevated bridge, and then you have that retaining bar. So if you're like me and you tend to use the smallest hole on a strap or even punch a smaller hole, sometimes a tightly strapped strap can get stuck or pinned on the pin. That little retaining bar makes it easy to remove the strap even if it's strapped tightly. Taking a look at the case, Lange definitely went its own way with this watch, and that's a bit of a relief because we have too many Gerald Genta knockoffs and watches that want to be the Nautilus or the Royal Oak. This is an interesting fusion of Lange's case shape with a sports watch intent, and you can see there's a little bit more fastening and some interplay between satin and polish that you don't find on, for example, a Lange 1, which has a more conventional sheer case band. You can also see that the lug profiles are ever slightly more angular and slightly more severe in their expression of creases and curves. They make themselves known in a way the dress watches don't. This end link is nicely integrated on the top. The idea is to create an all-of-a-piece look that echoes the steel model of this watch, which came out before the white gold model. To date, the white gold model only available on straps. We have a traditional Lange domed bezel, but you can see that there's a little bit of a joint between the case band and the bezel that visually articulates the case. And then we have what appears to be a crown guard structure that's actually two pusher adjusters, one for the date and one for the day on the Daymatic display system. The dial features a lovely metallic gray in matte finish with a coining outboard under the hour track. You can see there's a silvered chapter ring outboard that can be used for reading the minutes in individual 1-minute increments, with the Arabic numerals present every 5 minutes. The hands, as well as the frames for the calendar and the indices, they are all 18-karat white gold and rhodium plated, so they will never tarnish or oxidize. We have that same radial coining in the small seconds down at 6 o'clock, and then we have what Lange calls their Daymatic complication with the Panorama Datum, or the big date, over at 3 o'clock, and then over at 9 you have the day of the week. The watch does feature a screw-down crown to help it achieve its 120 meters of water resistance, and then you can see the turn of the calendar is very rapid at midnight. It's not a pure instantaneous jump, but it is very close. Note the use of stop seconds, and now I can demonstrate the quickset system for the calendar, and it is a very sharp feel, as good as the best column wheel chronograph, which is to say rather similar to the feel you get from operating a datograph. Taking a look at the profile, you can see that the pushers themselves come to a point. They feature polish and satin, and they have a highly angular appearance that is anything but reminiscent of conventional pushers. It's nicely blended into the profile of the case. You could miss them if you didn't know they were there. Now, turning the watch over, beneath its dial, we have the new Daymatic caliber 155-1. It's based on caliber L086, but there are some changes. For one thing, the movement uses Lange's first ever 8 beat per second rate, which is to say 4 Hertz, one of several features that have been included in order to make the movement less susceptible to shock-induced timing deviation or shock-induced error. And you can see some of these features: the higher beat rate, the dual-anchored balance bridge rather than a single-sided balance cock, and a larger balance with more mass. The higher beat rate, the full balance bridge, the fact that this is pretty much a free-sprung balance architecture, and the balance's size, all of these mitigate against shock and the possibility that the shock will either damage the movement or change its timing. So you can see it is a center rotor automatic. The rotor itself is made of RCAP, a copper and nickel alloy, and then it's blackened to give it that nice gray contrast with the nickel copper zinc bridges. But the mass itself is made of platinum for maximum winding efficiency. You can see fired blued screws are used to fix the rotor to the mass, and then we have both polished and fired blued screws on this movement. We also have on the edge of the bridges, and there are a handful of bridges here, that mirrored anglage characteristic of high horology watches, and we have a full freehand engraved balance bridge. With the full bridge, there is now more to engrave. The swan's neck is black polished. There's an engine turning on the base plate, and in comparison to the L086, you can see that the stripes across the bridge are actually quite a bit broader than the narrower stripes on the 086. Because it does have a higher beat rate than the 086, the 72-hour power reserve goes down to 50 hours, which is still more than you'll get on a 5711. Now, the watch, of course, has the double quick sets via pusher and the stop seconds function. And you can see it is nicely decorated on all surfaces, with my favorite detail being the combination of mirrored beveling on the edge of the rotor and the satination across its top, with the media blasting within the rotor. So 3 different finishes on that rotor. You can also see a detail that's important to note: SUG on the case. To this day, Lange does not make its own cases, and many of the precious metal Lange cases are made by a company called SUG, which is Zinn of Frankfurt's case factory. So if you're familiar with Zinn watches, that's who made this case. This is a 5-position adjusted movement, 5 position being the chronometer and high horology standard, all of it pivoting on 31 joules. And in a nod to pocket watch history, it still has the 3/4 style bridge, as well as the glasuta stripes and the use of that nickel copper zinc alloy. There is 1 jewel set in a chaton, a golden chaton fixed by blued screws, and you can see that is for the escape wheel adjacent to the anchor. So we have 1 traditional pocket watch style screw fixed chaton. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details of this a.lange Sohne Odysseus. And that is the Odysseus by night.